In this week's lecture, we will continue learning about the interdisciplinary research process, the IRP. Last week, we learned about Step 1, identifying a complex problem or research question, and we learned about Step 2, justifying an interdisciplinary approach. This week, we'll move forward with the process and focus on Step 3, which is to identify the disciplines that are relevant to the problem or research question. There are 3 parts or sub-steps involved, including selecting a list of many potentially relevant disciplines, mapping the problem to better understand the contributions of each of these disciplines, and narrowing the initial list to include only the most relevant disciplines. We will cover each of these sub-steps in this lecture, and then you'll have an opportunity to practice this step in this week's discussion. The first sub-step of Step 3 is to select a list of disciplines that are potentially relevant to the problem. It's important to consider as many disciplines as possible in this initial sub-step. We can confirm the relevance of these disciplines later. So what is a potentially relevant discipline? It's one whose research domain includes at least one phenomenon involved in the problem. Complex problems usually involve multiple phenomena. If a discipline examines at least one of these phenomena, it's relevant to the whole problem. Compared to some of the other tasks involved in the IRP, this one is relatively straightforward. At this point, we are not concerned with whether the discipline has actually contributed significant insights. We can confirm that later. For now, we want to try to identify as many disciplines as possible. After all, interdisciplinarians seek comprehensive understanding of the problems they examine. To do this, we are going to focus on both the phenomena of interest as well as the perspectives of the many disciplines that are relevant to the problem. To help you identify potentially relevant disciplines, start by focusing on the phenomena that are relevant to your problem. We want to first focus on the phenomena and then try to link that phenomena to disciplines. Use tables 2.3 and 2.4 from Chapter 2 to see what disciplines focus on what phenomena. Table 2.4 lists several categories of phenomena, including genetic predisposition, individual differences, economy, art, politics, culture, social structure, technology and science, health, population, and non-human environment. Once you've identified the phenomena involved in the problem, use the table to help you categorize that phenomena. Then, Table 2.3 should help you tie the phenomena of interest, of relevance, to specific disciplines. In addition to phenomena, we can also consider disciplinary perspectives. Refer to Table 2.2 in Chapter 2 to see if the problem as a whole is studied by specific disciplines. Again, we will confirm whether the disciplines actually study the topic later. For now, we are trying to find all of the potentially relevant disciplines. We don't want to miss anything at this point. Once we've identified a comprehensive list, we can then skim the literature using Google Scholar or the university library's databases. We need to look to see if the discipline's experts have published material about the topic. We may want to jot down the sources that appear to make significant contributions to the topic, and we may want to make notes about which disciplines do not appear to study the topic. These notes will help us in the last sub-step of Step 3. This table, Table 4.1 from the textbook, is an example of what we are trying to accomplish in this first sub-step. In the left column, we can see a list of disciplines that are thought to be related to the issue of human cloning. biology, psychology, political science, philosophy, religious studies, law, bioethics. Then in the right column, we can see a brief explanation of how each discipline is related to the problem, how each discipline attempts to explain the problem, its causes, its outcomes, prevention, treatment, and so on. In this example, we can see that psychologists might want to examine the psychological impact of being a cloned human. We can continue using a table like this one as we complete step 3 and the subsequent steps, updating it as we go. The second sub-step of step 3 is to map the problem, to better understand the contributions of multiple disciplines. Start the mapping process by identifying the various parts or components of the problem. Consider causes, outcomes, prevention, and treatment. Then, relate the various parts to each other and to the problem as a whole. For example, you can use different types of lines to indicate direct and indirect relationships between parts, or you can use subscripts to indicate the strength and direction of relationships, the correlation coefficients that you might find in your quick literature search. You can also use color coding and symbols to help you map the parts. The good news is there are many ways to do this, and we'll cover 2 of the 4 types of maps in this lecture. Once we've developed a map of the problem, it's easier for us to understand the entire system in which the problem exists. Sometimes these maps reveal gaps in our understanding. Other times, they show us when we might be overemphasizing one discipline at the expense of another. They can also help us eliminate non-relevant or non-significant disciplines. Like other stages of the IRP, the mapping stage is iterative. Many interdisciplinarians begin mapping the problem as early as step 1. At the very least, beginners will want to develop a map before they proceed to step 4. As we work through the 10 steps, the maps we make may need to be changed, may need to be updated. Mapping the problem requires what we call systems thinking. It's a great conceptual skill to develop for any role. Systems thinking involves understanding the whole system, its various parts, and the relationships between those parts. Systems thinking also involves visualizing the whole and its parts, visualizing how the different components relate to each other and the whole system. With experience, interdisciplinarians can learn how to identify positive and negative feedback loops, as well as patterns or themes across time. Sometimes 2 variables move together. As one increases, the other increases, known as a positive feedback loop. With other pairs of variables, as one increases, the other decreases, known as a negative feedback loop. There are 4 types of maps discussed in the textbook. We are going to cover 2 of them in this lecture. One of the maps that interdisciplinarians often use is the system map. Here, the problem or research question serve as the system, and the map shows all the parts of the problem or the system, as well as the relationships between the parts. Variable A influences variable B influences variable C influences variable D, and variable D influences variable A. Generally speaking, system maps have 2 key elements. First, they contain a comprehensive portion of the phenomena relevant to a problem. Second, these maps contain lines, arrows, text, symbols that indicate how the phenomena are related to and how they influence each other. There are 2 types of system maps that we might use. Causal loop diagrams help identify how topics are related. Stock and flow diagrams help us visualize the stages or the process involved in a complex system. Both of these maps make it easier for us to identify relevant disciplines. More specifically, system maps have several benefits. They help us clarify which part of the problem is being studied by which discipline, and prioritize relationships within the system to identify those that are most important. We simply cannot cover everything, and so we often have to prioritize what will be the focus of our research. System maps also help us understand why a system behaves the way it does. Finally, these visualizations can help us identify overlooked disciplines and overlooked systems, ones that we didn't initially perceive to be systems. The mapping process may illuminate the notion that our problem is part of a bigger system that other disciplinarians might study. That connection to other people's research is extremely important in interdisciplinary studies. Communicating these connections to the interdisciplinary community can help other interdisciplinarians in the work they do. Here is an example of a causal loop diagram. The phenomena or aspects of the problem are labeled with text: driving, air quality, immigration, population, jobs. The lines with arrows illustrate causal relationships. The subscript S shows phenomena that move in the same direction, and the subscript O shows phenomena that move in opposite directions. Please take a moment to pause the video and review this diagram. Here is an example of a stock and flow diagram. This one shows how people move through the stages of diabetes and the public health interventions designed to address the flow. Each box represents a stock or an accumulation of people. The first stock is people with normal glycemic levels. The arrows represent the flow or relationships between various stocks. The first stock of people can become people with pre-diabetes and vice versa. This back and forth relationship is depicted by the two arrows moving in opposite directions between the first two boxes on the left. Between the second and third boxes, we can see an arrow moving only to the right, meaning once people develop diabetes, they cannot return to the pre-diabetes stock or state. Another type of map we might want to use in step 3 is called the research map. It seeks to visualize the research process from beginning to end. By doing this up front, we can save ourselves a lot of time later in the research process. Like the system map, the research map helps us identify the various components of the problem and then identify the relevant disciplines. Let's take a look at the key components of a research map by looking at the textbook's example. In this figure from the textbook, we can see that a research map usually includes the purpose of the research, a list of potentially relevant disciplines, an explanation of each discipline's perspective on the problem, and an explanation of each discipline's assumptions about the problem. And the map also includes non-disciplinary sources, like people who experience the problem in real life. We can interview them to learn more about the problem. Although they are not considered peer-reviewed sources, they certainly have a perspective on the problem that interdisciplinarians cannot ignore. The final sub-step involved in step 3 is to narrow the initial list of potentially relevant disciplines to those that are most relevant to the problem. The most relevant disciplines are those that are most directly connected to the problem, those that have produced the most important research on it, and those that have advanced the most compelling theories to explain it. Experienced interdisciplinarians might narrow their list to 3 or 4 disciplines. Undergraduate students in the Integrative Studies program focus on 2 disciplines. To help us narrow our initial list, we should ask ourselves 3 questions about each discipline that we've identified. We should also refer to the map we created in Substep 2. The first question is, does the discipline have a well-defined perspective on the problem? Explain how each discipline illuminates the whole problem or some aspect of it. The textbook recommends rephrasing each perspective in the form of an overarching question about the problem. It also provides several examples of how to do this toward the end of the chapter. The second question is, has the discipline produced a significant body of research on the problem? This information, which includes insights and supporting evidence, can usually be found in peer-reviewed journals and academic publications. You might also consider asking disciplinary experts for their opinion about the significance of a body of research. As you search, look for publications that have been cited hundreds or even thousands of times, as well as those that have been published within the last few years. Older publications can provide history, context, but newer publications are going to frame the problem in the most up-to-date way. The third question to ask ourselves is, has the discipline generated theories to explain the problem? We are looking for at least one theory. Multiple theories would be better. Look for theories that attempt to explain the antecedents or causes of the problem, as well as the consequences or outcomes of the problem. Also, if possible, look for theories that conflict with other theories in the same discipline or with the theories proposed by other disciplines. Once we have identified the most relevant disciplines, we can confirm their relevance and significance in subsequent steps of the IRP. For example, in Step 4, we may find that the research put forth by one discipline is not as relevant as we initially thought. Or we may discover a connection to a discipline we hadn't yet considered. If so, we would return to Step 3 and reassess the decisions we made before repeating Step 4, which we will cover in detail next week.